and welcome to She Comes By, a podcast where I interrogate my friends about bisexuality. I'm your host, Alex Mannix. In this week's episode, I interview Ariel Butters, co-host and co-creator of Actually Useful, a podcast about radically useful tech and resisting enshittification. It also happens to be an industry plant podcast produced by our very own producer, Josh. We cover a wide range of topics, including romance novels, zoo, digital data governance, demisexuality and the asexual landscape, and of course, bisexuality. I hope you enjoy our conversation and an extra special edition of Gay Straight Bi. You never know what may happen when you come by and join us. Well, Ariel, thank you so much for joining us today. I ask guests to introduce themselves on the show. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Ariel Butters. I'm 35 years old. Yeah, I live in LA. Big book person, big tech person. I host a podcast, which I'll plug at the end, and North Carolina native. I don't know. That's me.
Oh, cool. What part of North Carolina?
I'm from Raleigh.
I lived in Raleigh during 2016. I was running a
way.
voter registration campaign, which was really fun until the election happened.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I lived in North Carolina until I graduated college. I went to college at Chapel Hill, so like not that far from where I'm from. But I remember Amendment 1, which was a gay-related amendment, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being like I was canvassing, I was like doing all kinds of work, and I just thought it was such a no-brainer. I was like, nobody's dumb enough to fall for this, because there was so much like trickery and what the legislature was actually trying to achieve and how they marketed it as being anti-gay, and it wasn't it was a whole thing. And I was like, no one's going to fall for this. And of course they did fall for it. And it was like the votes came in like a couple days before I went to move to California. And when they came in, I was like, well, thank God I'm moving to California. I'm done here now. I'm ready to move on. So that was the end of me in North Carolina.
Yeah. I mean, I really, again, when it was good, it was good. It was really fun to be there. It was fun to be at I think our office got up to like 70 canvassers. So we were sending 70 people out a day, just registering people to vote. And like, it was the farthest south I've ever lived. Things were blooming all the time. It was so green. Like it was very lovely. Well, Ariel, this is a fun question for new friends, but who are we to each other? How do we know each other?
Oh, well, we're both Industry Plant Network hosts. I host a podcast called Actually Useful. It's about enshittification and the degradation of tech for profit. And we're both friends of Josh.
Friends of the show, friends of Josh, friends of Industry Plant. I got to be a guest on Actually Useful.
Yes, check it out. Episode 2.
Yeah, it was so fun. I also thank you so much for your patience. I think I was probably your most chaotic background.
Just the fact that we were like asking you about where you work an hour after your work was going through like super big crisis, that I was like, wow, it's just going to be one of those things where it's going to be a story for the future of just like, yeah, so the first time we ever had a guest, it was sort of terrible timing, but you did great.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, I feel like now, I mean, if we had done it or if we redo an episode, I'll feel like I'll be much less, because it was like either right before the vote or like right before like public media was getting defunded. And I was like, I don't want to give any fodder, like don't want to have off chance. And now everything's defunded. So it's like, now I can say whatever I want. Spoiler alert. I work for NPR. I don't know. Yeah. I think if you're listening to this podcast, if you read She Comes By, I think you know me in person. And I think you probably know that I work at NPR. But yeah, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting just announced that in 2026, they will be shuttering. I guess that's what happens when you're a fully federally funded organization and all your funding goes away. But there's a part of me that's just like, can't we just wait until Trump's out and then you come back? Like, There's so much rebuilding that we're going to have to do.
That was like
I'm not even thinking.
The day after the election, after this election, that was the thing when I was like sobbing. That was the thing that got me, was specifically how much is going to get lost. Like, and that's like the goal, right? Where it's like, okay, people will figure it out eventually. Like, history will be on the right side. Like, that's going to happen. But there's so much that gets lost in the meantime. There's so much shit that has to get rebuilt. There's so much art that gets lost. And like, yeah, dude, that's the part that, I mean, obviously a lot of things bum me out about our political situation, but I feel like the like time loss of just like all the websites getting, destroyed, like everything that's getting lost is the part that like really stresses me out, because you just think about how much work the people who made it put into it and our inability to honor that,
It's so frustrating. I remember In college, one of my best friends was studying library science, and she said, I love libraries because we would never get them now. If like
Yeah.
it was a new idea to have libraries,
That's so
Congress would
deep.
never
That's
pass
so
it.
true.
And we were like, haha, isn't it nice that we have them? And now it's like, well, shit.
Yeah.
They're not getting funded anymore. And so once they go away, like, are we going to have the political will to bring them back? Like, I don't know. It's just really fucking scary.
Yeah, dude. What a bummer.
Anyway, well, you touched on this a little bit, but another question I have is just, what are you up to these days? What do you spend your time doing? You said you like books. What kind of books do you like?
I read all kinds of books. So I read 400 books a year. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of like a defining character trait about me is that I read more than
400.
400, more than a book a day. Yeah.
More than a book a day?
More than you have to. It's only 365 days in the year. So
I
yeah,
guess
more than a book
that
a
is
day.
math. Holy
Yeah.
how? Okay, I have many questions.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Audiobooks and the library. So I don't pay for most books. I mean, I do, like, if you like look around my apartment, I literally have like 3,000 books in my 1-bedroom apartment. That's not an exaggeration. I have 15 bookshelves. They're on the floor. They're everywhere. So like I do have books, but I buy mostly used books when I can. And like I primarily read through audiobook on the library. So like I listen at like 2x. I absolutely cannot listen to anything at one speed. Josh actually like teased me because I tried to speed up some of our episodes just like for everyone. And he was like, you can't do that. Like I cannot like deliver the podcast at like 1.3. I actually do still read always. So like I have a Kindle. I read my Kindle before I go to bed, like to wind down. The audiobook is sort of as I'm going around my day. And then some books I just find really hard to process like from audio. So I read them with my eyes. My big genre is romance. I read a ton of romance. I'm like very well versed in romance. I'm very in the romance girly subculture. I go to 6 romance book clubs. I moderate the Discord for the Ripped Bodice. I am like very plugged into the romance world.
I am so excited to talk to you. I read a lot of romance vicariously through one of my roommates. So she will like pass on to me the ones she'll be like, I'll just tell you about this one. This one you have to read.
Okay.
Where are you on the like romantasy?
Yeah, romantasy is not my top genre. I read ACOTAR. I've read a lot of the hits in terms of romantasy. I do like it.
ACOTAR, for people who don't know, which I didn't know for like A Court of Thorn and Roses.
Yes,
people
A Court of
saying
Thorns
ACOTAR, and I would be like, Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yeah.
I don't remember that part of the show.
Yeah, I do think these books are absurd. My big thing about this is true of fantasy in general. Like this is true of Brandon Sanderson and Tolkien. This is true of everybody. But like past basically a debut novel that goes really well, these folks do not get edited. So they will just make up plot points at like 70% of the way through the book where like you'll read a romantasy and she'll be like, your main character will be like shit out of luck. And then it'll be like, and then she remembered the Sword of Kings, and the Sword of Kings actually is in this cave that she happens to be right next to. And if she uses the Sword of Kings, it'll solve all her problems. And I'm like, what are we doing here, folks? We're just making shit up. But I still think it's great. Like I still love it. I still read it. But yeah, I'm not as rabid on the romantasy as I know a lot of people in the romance subgenre are like absolutely feral for romantasy. And I take a more neutral stance on it. Some of it's good, some of it's trash. I read all of it.
You beat me. At one point I was in 3 different book clubs plus a writer's group.
Yeah, I'm in a writer's group as well.
Yeah. And they were all sci-fi fantasy / like speculative fiction. So I feel our Venn diagram is actually a little bit different. I've read 1 or 2 cozy romance novels. I've read a couple cozy sci-fi fantasy books, but I tend to be a little bit more into like bigger world building.
From science fiction or fantasy?
Both, yeah. The Priory of the Orange Tree is the one that's like coming to mind.
Yeah, also just like such a chunker of a book.
Yeah.
Huge in terms of its impact and also what a chunker.
Absolutely. Also, spoilers a little bit. I didn't know it was going to be gay. I just thought I was reading like I just thought I was reading a big fantasy book, and then I was like, wait, what? Like I love when I don't expect a book to be gay and then it's gay.
It's surprise gay.
Speaking of, again, maybe a spoiler, I'm so sorry, but my first romance novel ever was A Sea of Ruin.
Haven't read it.
Because it was my first romance read, my antennas were up for anything. I was like, is this supposed to be turning me on? Like, is this supposed to be salacious?
Yeah.
And it was just like, no, this is just plot description.
Right,
like,
right,
there's not anything happening here. The other embarrassing one that's queer that I read, A Hunt So Wild and Cruel.
No, see, I've never heard of that. See, this is the crazy thing. As a person who has read many books in my life, sometimes I get into a book slump and I'm like, there's no new books. I've read every single book that's ever been written. I've read every book that hasn't been written yet. All books have been in my head. And then I'll hang out with someone and they'll name like 15 books I've never heard of. And I'm like, how is this possible? But it's because there's a lot of books, everybody.
There's so many books. What's your favorite that you've read recently?
One of my favorites that I've read recently, it came out 2 months ago, is Atmosphere by Jenkins Reid. Because I read so many books, I feel like it's so hard for me to pick like favorites. But in terms of things I've read recently that make an impact, like Atmosphere was so good. So it's about lesbian astronauts in the 80s. So it's like right when the space shuttle program opens for women astronauts. So like they're in training when Sally Ride goes up in space. And Taylor Jenkins Reid is an incredible author. She does like upmarket fiction, so it's not technically romance, but it is a love story, and it does follow love story rules, which is that it has a happy ending. You cannot be a romance if you don't have a happy ending, which is important to clarify because like this book will absolutely devastate. It'll devastate you, like in a good way, but also a bad way. Like it's just like she writes really vivid characters. She writes incredible dialogue. Like it's so good. But yeah, lesbian astronauts in the 80s. And it's nice too because Taylor Jenkins Reid is bisexual, but all of her books have been hetero, except she wrote Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And like,
oh, okay, yeah,
the
I've heard of that
main
one.
character, there's not like a love story in that, but like the old lady who's Evelyn Hugo, like she I don't know if this is a spoiler. It's the book's been out for so long now, but she's gay. she had I think she's bisexual. And so yeah, it's nice. It was nice to see Taylor Jenkins Reid do a sapphic book, and it's really good. And it'll punch you in the gut.
Well, I'm excited to read that one. Well, I think that's a good transition into the question we ask everyone who comes on the podcast. Ariel, are you bisexual? Why or why not?
Okay. Yeah, I am not bisexual. I don't describe myself as bisexual. The words I typically use, I use a bunch of them, but I am like the most technically accurate term for my identity, I think would be demisexual, which is on the asexual spectrum or ace spectrum. Demisexual refers to a person who might feel sexual attraction, but as a prerequisite for it, there has to be like a pretty robust emotional bond. So like dating apps are really hard for me. I've been on them, but like it's just really hard because I'm not gonna meet someone and find something I want to follow. Like it's just like sort of impossible for me to meet someone once and then be like, yeah, that'll do. I also call myself gray ace, which is like gray ace is just like ace not otherwise specified, which I think is just a nice umbrella term. Or sometimes I'll say ace-ish. Like if I'm with other people that I think have a high likelihood of knowing what ace means, I'll just say ace-ish to be quick with it, you know. A lot of ace folks use two descriptor words. There's the sexual modifier, and then there's a romantic modifier. So you could be like asexual biromantic or asexual heteroromantic or asexual demi-romantic or whatever. I've never used a romantic modifier because I think I just haven't picked one yet. So like recently I've been flirting with biromantic. I have dated women. I've dabbled in the ladies. It doesn't have like a dramatically, it's so funny. There is like a really common experience of women who date straight men, don't like it, assume that they're asexual, then date a woman and they're like, oh shit, I'm actually like bisexual or I'm lesbian or whatever. And so I didn't want to, like, for science's sake, I had to know. So I've done the full gamut of exploration, and it really, like, demisexual is the best word to describe it, just because that's the part that feels the most true is needing some type of like deep emotional bond for attraction to feel like real in any meaningful way.
I have been on the apps at various points in my life, and I've seen there's a decent amount of people who will say like demisexual, or I've seen less ace terminology.
Yeah.
Like on the apps. Demisexual seems to be one that people feel a little bit more comfortable like kind of putting out there.
Yeah, I think it makes sense because like ace people can date. I mean, like people who are like truly squarely on the full asexual end of the spectrum, there's like sex repulsed and sex positive. If you're sex repulsed and you're ace, I'm not trying to make a sweeping assumption, but my assumption would be you're not on the apps because you're not trying to have sex with anybody. But there are obviously like other reasons to enjoy sex than just like strictly attraction. And so yeah, I think for ace folks who are like sex positive and like are trying to meet someone, whether it's for sex or partnership or whatever, I do understand why like demisexual would be more likely to be on the apps, or like sapiosexual or something, or gray sexual than asexual, just because I think also people, whether it's true or not for the person who set up the profile, I think somebody swiping might be like, oh, and like people just don't know what asexual means. Like they really don't understand the ace I actually like calling it a landscape better than a spectrum, because I'm just like, it has a lot of dimensions to the whole queer landscape. The queer extended universe
Oh
has
my
a
God.
lot of corners to it, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God. I love queer extended universe. I love yeah, the ace landscape. Yeah, what does asexuality and demisexuality mean to you?
When I was younger, I felt like I knew that I was on the ace spectrum. I didn't really have the language for it, which is like super common for ace folks. In my opinion, the analogous document to like the lesbian master doc is the book Ace by Angela Chen. Like I have recommended that book to a number of people, and I think like 70% of people who read it that I recommended come back and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm ace." And it's like, "Yeah, no, that's why I recommended it." I kind of thought. And there's a really funny story in there of this guy who was like religious. He was raised in the church, and like purity culture, sexual trauma, like fat phobia, misogyny, all kinds of things interrupt a person's ability to like truly explore whether they're ace, because those are all things that like affect how you perceive your sexuality and what gets in the way of it. And there was this guy in this story in Ace that he was like, you know, really into his youth group, and he was like dating his girlfriend, and he remembered like all the bros in youth group being like, "Wow, you're so good at like resisting temptation, like you're so strong." And he was just like, "I don't know, I feel blessed." And of course, like as an adult, he was like, "Wait a second, I'm asexual." Like I didn't, there was no temptation for me. And so I think like in a totally different way, I don't have like I was not affected by purity culture in any way, but like I think I just didn't have the language for it because I knew what asexual was, and it always felt like it was, I would like try to use that term to describe myself, but I also knew that I was a sexual person and that I had sexual feelings. So it didn't really feel correct. And I didn't discover the word demisexual until like maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. I was like already in my like late 20s. I'd already had relationships, and as soon as I discovered it, like it truly was like a light bulb went off, and all my experiences started to really make sense to me. And so yeah, it's been a really helpful, I think all identity labels are ultimately tools, you know, they're tools to help you express yourself and help you understand yourself. And it's been a really helpful tool for me in terms of like settling a lot of, you know, the compulsory sexuality and compulsory partnership that I think is just endemic to a lot of our social life. And so it's given me a really helpful way to sort of articulate myself to other people in particular.
Yeah, I really relate to labels as tools.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you for sharing all that. You kind of answered this a little bit, but when did you realize you weren't straight or that you might be on the ace spectrum or in the ace landscape?
In the ace landscape, in the extended universe. Yeah, so this is kind of funny. When I was in high school, I remember calling myself autosexual. Like I was like, I think I'm autosexual, which at the time Latin was my foreign language in high school because I was that kind of person. Auto is a prefix for self. I just was like, that is the easiest way I have to describe myself. And to me, that meant like, I feel sexual as a person in the way that I experience the world. Like I experience desire, but it's very much only in my own universe. Like I never felt a zing with another person. But yeah, I would describe myself as autosexual. I remember someone once being like, I think that's just called confidence. And I was like, that is not at all what I am trying to explain to you right now. And then when I found demisexual and like the ace spectrum, I was like, okay, this is it. And it is funny. I mean, the ace extended landscape is huge. Autosexual is an identity. I don't actually think it's probably the best identity for me, but I think I knew even in high school that I was having a different time than everybody else around me seemed to be having. And I had queer friends in high school. Like I did not grow up like sheltered. My family is very accepting. Like there was no amount of sort of like pressure to perform one way or another, other than the general pressure that we all have like living in this culture. I started to have inklings in high school, but it like I said, like, you know, I'm fat. I was fat my whole life. Like being fat, especially in high school, there's also a lot of like, well, does anyone even want to fuck you? Like, how would you even know, you know? Or like, I've had sexual trauma, like that's really unhelpful in terms of figuring out. I mean, it's unhelpful to a lot of things in your life, but like it's unhelpful to figuring out like, is my aversion in any type of intimate moment because of trauma, or is it because like I'm not necessarily built for this type of desire? So there were a lot of like complicating factors, and it really didn't click for me until I met, like I've basically had, you know, I've had relationships where there was more than nothing, but also not something, if that makes sense, in terms of like the amount of attraction that's there. But I have had one relationship where it was a zing. Like I was like, this is it. We'd known each other for a long time until it just sort of like woke up. I think honestly, like he was really sniffing around. He was trying to figure out how to make it work. And at one point I was like, wait, I think this is a thing. I think we're like into each other. And having that experience as like a contrast for like, oh, that's what it feels like. That's what people are talking about. That's what everybody's seeking. And there wasn't anything like special about that relationship otherwise. It's not like he like treated me differently, or like it wasn't even like a particularly like productive relationship. Like we had a lot of issues, but it was the first time that I was like, oh, this is a thing and it's cool, but it also gave me perspective of like, oh, this is not worth trying to force. Like, this is what it should feel like. It won't feel like that if I'm trying to force attraction to appear in any other situation for some other purpose, like to seem like, you know, to have a social reason to have a partner, or because I'm afraid of loneliness or whatever, all the other reasons you might want to have like romantic or sexual companionship. I was like, that it's not worth it now that I know what it is supposed to feel like.
Do you feel like you have ace or demisexual community?
Oh my gosh. So here's a fun thing. I don't know if this is true about all romance girlies, like if this cross section exists or if this is like an LA thing or what. But I think so, like our broad book club includes maybe like 50 regular attendees to like one of the clubs or all of the clubs or whatever. I'm guessing, I think like 15, maybe even more. I think at least 15 out of those 50 people are on the ace spectrum, which is so funny when you think about like it's a romance book club. We're reading like explicitly spicy scenes all the time, which like I'm known as being like I'm a hoe for a 5 chili pepper book. Like that's I'd like to get a little dirty, a little freaky in the book.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you know,
What's the again, this is my knowledge through osmosis, but like the scale of like closed door, it's like kisses and hand holding to like closed door to like full room something. What's that scale?
yeah, I don't know all the steps, but you kind of have it. So yeah, closed door means that in the narrative, they are having sex and you know that they're having sex. So like they might be kissing, they might be hot and heavy. You can kind of go up to the limit of what you want to do, but they close the door metaphorically on the page. So it's like usually it's the end of a chapter and maybe you know how they feel about it. And at the beginning of the next chapter, they're like waking up the next morning or they're saying goodbye to each other and there's no on page explicit sex. And then you can go, so like then the next stage is sort of like there is on page explicit sex and then how explicit you want to get with that, the types of terminologies you want to use, the types of like kinks you want to show. Is it more than one? Is it more than 2 people? Whatever. Like you can get as freaky as your believe. There's fanfic exists, everybody. So like you can go to the limit on whatever your imagination can provide. All the alien romances, you know, are all, they have like 2 penises a lot of the time on one person, which is a whole separate thing. So yeah, there's a broad spectrum of how much sex is in the book. And it's not an indicator either of like how good the book is. I'll say like one of my favorite authors is Abby Jimenez. And she just, like, her most recent book is called Say You'll Remember Me. I think Abby writes fantastic sex scenes. A good sex scene is, you know, it's not just supposed to be titillating. It's also supposed to like further the character's connection, just like real sex should, especially coming from a demisexual. It should further your connection. But her most recent book, Say You'll Remember Me, it's about a character who's dealing with her mother's dementia in a really close-up lens. Like, the whole book is really about her coping with the grief of losing her mom as she knew her and being a primary caregiver. And I'm assuming here, just because Abby Jimenez has written so many open door books, that book is closed door. And I think it's because she wanted to sort of respect the heavier tone of the subject, is my assumption. So like, there's no correlation between being closed door and open door and like how, like, what actually is happening in the book or how good it is or anything like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned fan fiction. Do you also partake in the fan fiction universe?
Of the romance subgenre, I'm actually like pretty unfanficked. Like, I don't read a lot of fanfic. I have a shortcut to AO3 on my phone, Archive of Our Own. I have read fanfic, particularly when it is like pointed out to me as something that I would enjoy reading. But most of the time I'm reading, you know, traditionally published or self-published books. But most romance people are like really into fanfic. Got into it really young. Fanfic definitely gets like way crazier in terms of plot lines, sex scenes, whatever, than anything that's getting published, even self-published books. But I do always say all romance readers eventually become romance writers. And so I also am like writing a romance novel because it is truly inevitable that like that happens at some point.
That is so exciting. Can you talk or tell me anything about your romance novel that you're writing?
Yes, it takes place in a zoo. I already have 11 books and a spinoff planned. They're not written. I'm a very slow fiction writer. But yeah, it's about this first book. So like in series where, so like, this is the thing. Okay, so I read a lot of like queer romance, and there's this funny thing in queer romance that's they're kind of breaking it now and getting more comfortable with like maybe one book is and then the next book is sapphic or whatever. But like historically, the way that these books work is that there's like the series is about a small town. It's about like a coffee shop in a small town, and you like meet all these characters, and you just start to realize like every single person in this town is gay because there's going to be 25 books and they're all going to be gay because the author writes gay romance. And so like, usually in those types of series, the first book is like the two leaders in the community. So my first book in my zoo series is the head vet who's just moved to California. It takes place in Lake Elsinore at a fictional zoo. She's the head vet. She just moved there from Texas. And then the like senior curator, which is like a curator is like a manager of keepers. It's sort of like a higher level keeper role. And he's fed up, and basically it was like a family zoo that got bought by corporate overlords, and the corporate overlords are horrible. And so the team, the like, you know, the plucky little community has to overthrow the corporate overlords, gain back control of the zoo for the people, save the system, and then figure out how to get like new leadership. And there's like a cheetah in it, and I've got all my side characters. That was the biggest thing. I had to plot out all these side characters. So the next book 2, is a sapphic book. So I have them all over. They're a full diverse crowd of community, you know.
Oh my God, it's like Bridgerton, but in a zoo.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah,
wow.
Basically. But yeah, it is slow going. I think I'm learning that different media I produce at very different rates. So apparently podcasts I can do relatively quickly, but fiction books is taking me a long time. But I am in a writing group, and 2 of the people in my writing group, one, it just got an agent. We're very happy for her. And the other is self-publishing her Frankenstein-related romance this year. They're both really fucking good. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's so exciting. You have to keep us informed about
gotta forward you them once they happen. Send you a copy.
Yeah, I'd be happy to be a beta reader as well.
Hell yeah.
Sorry, I have so many questions. Did you know a lot about zoos before you started writing this, or did you have to do zoo research?
both my writing group, it continues every single time I submit something. They're like, how do you know so much about zoos? So I did know a lot about zoos. I'm definitely like, I was like an animal kid. I was a vet tech. Like I know a lot about animals. I also like part of my inspiration is that my dad and I are really into this show on Animal Planet called Secrets of the Zoo. And there are like 200 episodes because they're in all different zoos. I think they're in like 10 different zoos. My favorite is the Taronga spinoff in Australia. I like the Taronga Zoo best. It's really good. It's just like a day in the life of being a zookeeper. You get to know all the different keepers, and it's just like an honest telling of sort of like how they do their jobs and how the animals are doing and what their relationships are with. And so some of the information is from Secrets of the Zoo that was kind of implanted in my head. I've seen them all. And then I'm doing a lot of research as I'm writing it. And so like I'll also do, once I'm a little further where I kind of know all my facts, you can, like a lot of zoos have programs where you can, like for a donation, because they're all nonprofits, or like they should be nonprofits. If they're not AZA certified, don't go to that zoo. But most of them, you can make a donation or a contribution that's like $200, and you can do backstage with the zookeeper sort of. So you can, usually it's because you want to like hang out with the animal, like feed the turtles or whatever. In my case, I'm going to do that at a couple of zoos and be like, I would like to see the animals, but I just want to shadow you and ask you questions about like, when you use the Zim software, does it actually have these types of fields? Because for some reason, that's a detail I have in my romance novel.
Well, yeah, I mean, as a fellow techie, when something you have to know the very specific industry software
Yes.
to make an accurate portrayal of the world that you're building.
Yes, and all zoos run this software. From Species 360 is the company, and the program is called, the type of software is called a ZIM. So like instead of a CMS, it's ZIMS, which is Zoological Information Management System. Yeah, and now you know.
I love knowing that. I love that I now know that.
Yep. It's got all the information on them. And here's the other thing, and this is like a plot point in my book. Zoos that are AZA certified, those animals, their files, because like zoos share animals, like you can lease an animal from somewhere else. Like
it's like the interlion prairie loan.
Yes, the interlion prairie loan. Yeah, exactly. Great work.
I tried.
Yeah, so you can like, animals do get leased and traded, and that's all like for good reasons, and there's lots of reasons you do that, but their file comes with them everywhere. So it's like if you get an animal that's like an adult animal that wasn't from the wild, or even if they were, they should still have, all animals should have like robust records in ZIMS, and if they don't, that's a problem, because you can't just like find an animal, you know. You gotta, if they're a zoo animal, they should not be just randomly with no background.
Wow. The data politics of zoo, that's
the more
so
you know.
cool.
You thought you were going to learn about sexuality today, and instead you're learning about zoos.
I'm learning about ZIMS. Just for my own curiosity, you said you were a vet tech, and now you are in tech
Yes.
Via your, not just your podcast, actually useful, but I think you said you're a product manager for a tech company.
I've been a
as well?
product manager for pretty much my whole like adult career. I've worked at a number of startups. My specialty has previously been like marketplaces. For the last year, I've been consulting. So I'm helping. Basically, my consulting clients are people who have an idea. I'm really trying to like back people that are not the typical people who get funding and help them get to a point where they have the resources, they have the pitch deck. So I'm doing a lot of like pitch creation, pitch development, which goes beyond just the deck. It's sort of like, is your business plan viable? Is your user acquisition model something that's appealing to VCs? So in the past year, I've had a couple clients that are, people who have a good idea, who like don't really know how to navigate the system. And the goal is to get them into like an incubator or someone who can midwife them into the next stage of their journey.
Yeah, this might seem like a kind of a weird question, but does being queer or being in the ACE landscape like play a factor in your career?
I think not Not really, just that I think tech, especially being in California, like I work with a lot of queer people. The last company I worked there for 5 years, and I was like very involved in getting their employee resource groups set up. So they didn't have ERGs when I joined, and I sort of like helped shepherd them into being able to do that. And we did have like a queer ERG. So like I think it's generally fine. It's not like, good or bad one way or the other. I think the biggest time it comes into play, and this is specific to being ace, is like I don't really have interest, or I don't have a need to have like a life partner. I don't really particularly want to get married. I have like that might change at some point, but I think that that's probably true for me. I've had relationships that are like multi-years long where I'm like, whatever we're doing is fine. And I don't necessarily want it to be like an everyday thing. However, I would love to be a mom. Like I really, really want to be a mom. And I have planned to be a single parent for most of my life. And it just it weirdly gets harder and harder and harder. Like obviously like I was actually going to start getting myself pregnant from IUI, which is sort of like turkey basting. Basically, it's like, it's not IVF. You don't have to actually like do surgery. It's basically medical turkey basting to see if that would work. Not going to do that under the Trump administration. So that was like one of my first griefs that I had, because there's truly like explicitly in Project 2025 are punishments for single parents. But it's interesting because this is a thing that ACE activists really push back against in terms of how policy affects asexual people, because there's not a lot like, we can get into this, but there's not like compared to other queer identities, there's not a lot of like stigma necessarily. I mean, people do stereotype ace folks as being like robotic or whatever, but like you're not, because you're sort of like, it's not in anybody's face. So it's like you're not going to get people who like, I'm not going to get someone on the street who's like harassing me for being ace, because there's no identifier that I'm ace. So it's like a lot of my life, I don't necessarily experience some like overt discrimination because I'm ace. However, where it does come into play is that there are a lot of punishments for being single. So like there's so many, in a hotel room, you're actually paying for two people. You're not paying for one person. Like there are like your taxes are different when you're single. Like there's so many punishments in this world for being single. And I think it's absolutely crazy, especially in America. I think in Europe, it's a little different, and people like honor parenthood differently, but like it's crazy that in America in 2025 it is so hard to be a single parent. There are so many reasons to be a single parent that are like virtuous reasons. It should not be this hard. I have so many friends who are single parents, and it just like, it doesn't even matter like if you're in a good wealth bracket, it's still fucking hard. And like that's the main thing that I feel is like it's extra insulting to me, because I'm just like, my identity is not an identity that needs a partner to like raise a child with. So it feels shitty. And like that's what a lot of ace activists push back against, is these policies that, whether intentionally or most often unintentionally, they punish single people, and they really uphold this idea of like a traditional family as looking one way.
Yeah. Damn. I really feel a lot of this. I went through a period of 5 years where I wasn't having sex or dating, and I don't think I ever necessarily like questioned whether I was kind of like on the A spectrum or if I was demisexual, but I think like it really helped me figure out, yeah, just like what I want out of a relationship, and like also like, again, like that default, right? Like I was like, well, eventually I'll like find a partner and we will get married and maybe have kids, but also maybe not. But like, I think that period of my life, and then even though I have, started dating again, those things of like prioritizing what I actually want, or like what I actually want my life to look like, and how other people fit into that, I feel like is something that I've been thinking a lot about. And yeah, like you're saying, there's all these punishments or, ways that people who are single or who have like non-traditional relationships. Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how kind of there are invisible systems that still kind of promote this heteronormative, traditional, like nuclear family.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the most common, like by far and away, the most common like expression of what I would call an acephobic belief, like the time it comes up the most, is if I'm talking to someone, particularly to somebody new, but it could be like a family member or like someone I just haven't had this conversation with before, where they'll ask like, are you dating? And I'll be like, no, I don't date. You know, I don't always go straight into like, that's not really my sexuality, but I'll just be like, no. They're like, do you want to get married? Like, no. And this people are so uncomfortable with the idea of somebody being single for their whole life. And I have felt this way since high school. I remember getting in like so triggered, which in hindsight makes so much sense, when I would say like, I don't want to be dating anyone. And this is always the response. But if you met the right person, you would, right? Like people cannot cope with the idea of like, I have an incredibly vibrant community. Like I have like literally like 40 best friends. Like I'm going to be okay to live the rest of my life as a single person without like a particular partner. But it says so much about the person I'm talking to. And sometimes I'll call it, like I always call it out now, where I'm just like, you realize that you're like pushing something I don't believe in onto me. Like whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, you're doing it. And sometimes people will apologize immediately and be like, I didn't even realize that. Thank you for pointing it out, which is cool. You should do that if you accidentally say to someone, but what if you met the right person? I just feel like that phrase is really giving an updated, it's just a phase. Like it's got the same energy, you know? And so it is also frustrating for me because like quite literally because I'm demisexual and not like squarely asexual, by definition, if I do meet the right person, I might change my mind. But it's like, that's not the fucking point. You know, the point is I should be able to like say to someone that I don't want a partner, and they should just be like, oh, cool. Wow. Interesting to know that about you. You know, like that's it. That's the information.
Everything you're saying, I think there is an analogous, maybe a comparison. And I'm curious what you think about this to bisexuality. Like you said, like people say it's just a phase, or, you know, the thing of bisexual invisibility, I think refers to a couple different things, but it's like, you know, if you're in a relationship with someone of the same sex versus a different gender, like you're lumped into a bucket just like visually, and if someone doesn't know you, or if someone's just getting to know you, they might think, oh, well, you're gay or you're straight. The only time someone can be visibly bisexual often is if I'm holding hands with two people of different genders. Like, yeah, exactly. Do you feel like there's a comparison between the similar struggles in terms of people thinking they're phases, people thinking they don't exist, or it's just you're going to eventually pick a side?
Yeah, I think the similarity is that like there's an inherent amount of rigidity that people are comfortable with, that I think those identities, bisexuality, demisexuality, a number of other sexual identities and gender identities, lots of gender identities also challenge this, where it's like, these are actually not rigid concepts. And, you know, I was telling Josh this a couple of days ago, but like, I'm very grateful in my life. I have ace community. I have lots of people who either like couldn't care less that I'm ace, or like are excited about it, whatever. But it's very weird. I like my two oldest friends, one of whom I've been friends with like literally since we were like 9 years old. She's bisexual. She's gone through the whole process of like, she dated men for a lot of her life, and finally was like, I need to try dating women, married the first woman that she ended up dating, classic. And she just like doesn't believe that demisexuality is an identity. Like she doesn't really believe that most ace identities are real identities. And I feel very confident that at some point she's going to like wake up in bed one morning 20 years from now and be like, that's a fucked up thing that I said to my best friend, or like that's, you know, every time I express my identity in some way, she kind of like rolls her eyes, or like she just doesn't believe it's real. And it's so interesting. Like I was arguing with her about like, she also like, she thinks that like so in her mind, she's like bisexuality and pansexuality are like the same thing, because there are people who believe that bisexuality again means something rigid, meaning that it's like inherently transphobic because it doesn't say all, it says one or the other, which is like not true. And I think that she's like right for all intents and purposes, and like it doesn't just pick whatever identity feels good to you. But I remember I was telling her that like I have a friend who identifies as omnisexual, and there was like a difference that she, you know, my friend described with that. And again, my like childhood best friend who is queer like rolled her eyes and was like, that's not a real thing. And this goes back to the idea of identity labels being tools. And it's like, it doesn't actually matter what the word is, because it's not up to you, the listener, to decide that I fit in whatever rigid definition you want to make. And I think like, I have a lot of grace for my friend in this experience. I think that there's probably some like gatekeeping that comes with the process of like she had a very different relationship with her sexuality than I did. I like essentially pass as just like a normal straight woman all the time. Like I don't get challenged on a lot of things. Like I think that my life has been easier in a lot of ways. So like I'm giving her grace for that, but it is, I do think the pushback from people, whether it's about bisexuality or demisexuality, anybody who really wants these rigid definitions, it's the same. Yeah, it's the same with like a lot of trans identities, where I think there are people now who are comfortable with like you're a trans woman or you're a trans man. They might even be cool with non-binary. But if you're like a femme presenting man, like there's like they don't like that there's not enough rigidity. And it's like this really is just a tool to help you understand what is actually like a very nuanced and unique individual experience. And so like I think it reflects a lot of people's internal turmoil around their own gender norms, their own sexuality. I think a lot of people who like, in my experience, a lot of people who struggle with like bi folks, particularly women who struggle with bi women, I think a lot of times those women are struggling with their own experiences of feeling like they got put in the man box and maybe they didn't want to be in the man box. Like, I think it really says a lot more about the person who's judging than anything else. But I do think that that's like a very similar experience. People are just really, really uncomfortable with nuance. And I've let that just roll off of me of like, you know what? Thank God I'm comfortable with nuance. My life is so much easier because of it. But that's what I think it is.
So that being said about how labels are just tools and, putting people into rigid boxes is really bad, would you like to play a game where you put
yes,
where you put things into rigid boxes?
Hell yeah, let's do it. It's fine because I know that there's no right answer because they can't be that rigid, so it's perfect.
Cool. Well, it's been so lovely to talk to you. It has now come to the time for us to play a game called Gay Straight Bi.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll play Gay Straight Bi, but then I think maybe we can also play a fun version, which is A Straight Demi.
Ooh.
Or I'm curious what would be like a good, like, let me explain the rules to you first so you like know what it is. But basically I'm going to give you 3 things, not people, but like things, and it's vibe based, that it's going to be one of them is straight, one of them is gay, one of them's bi. You have to tell me which is which and give your reasoning. This way, these are like very rigid boxes. We're applying labels to things. But yeah, would Ace, Straight, and Demi be a good like?
Yeah, I think those work. I think those make sense.
Cool. So your first round is going to be historical romance, romantasy, and fanfic.
Okay, that's super easy. Historical is straight, romantasy is gay, and fanfic is bi.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So same categories. But Ace, Straight, Denny.
I actually think for this one, romantasy is straight. Historical is demi. And fanfic is ace. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know how to, it's so hard to explain the vibes. Okay, so I picked historical for Demi because I think that a lot of historicals have an undertone of like earnest. It's very earnest. Historicals tend to be like super earnest. They're like, these are people, I mean, this is like, we're talking about Fitzwilliam Darcy, you know what I mean? We're talking about like, I burn for you. And like demis are like real heart chakra folks. Fan fiction, I just feel like fan fiction can be like anything goes in fan fiction. And so it makes sense that you could just be like ace, you could be bi, you could be like fan fiction is like wherever like the nuance needs to live is over in fanfic. And then like romantasy, it's so funny because romantasy tends to have fated mates, which is a hotly contested trope in the romance genre. That's the idea that like whether you know it or not, your mate is already like out there and chosen for you, and like it's your destiny to find them and you know it. And so like I think though, like in the last category, I was like, oh, it's gay, because I was like, there's something like really lesbian about that, to be like, you know,
the urine and the
yeah. But I also think there's something very familiar about that idea, like traditional about that to some extent. So like it could also be kind of straight, that like the idea is that like there's someone out there for you and you're going to find them, you know, whereas like fanfic could absolutely be like, there's no one, you're dating the whole world, you know. It could be like, I keep thinking about this. You might have seen this. This like, I can't even credit the creator because I don't know who it is, but there was like this TikTok of like a lesbian interviewing other lesbians, and the question was, do you think all women should get married? And first, it's a supercut of all the answers. And it's like, they're all saying, should all women get married? Yes, all women should get married. And it's like, you're not expecting as the audience, you're like so surprised that all these like clearly lesbian women are like, yeah, all women should get married. And then they do the supercut of like the next piece of that, which is one big wife, all women married to each other all the time. One big wife. That's what we should have. And I feel like there's something really fanfic about that, of just like one big wife. So
all women should be married to each other.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the gist.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I went to a women's college, so
yeah.
I'm basically married to
you are part of the one
every
wife,
woman I went to college with, plus the people who aren't women.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so fun. I have two last questions for you. One is, do you have any pieces of like media or content related to demisexuality, asexuality, queerness that you wanna plug, that you like?
Yeah, I did write down a couple. Okay. So I've already mentioned a couple. So Ace by Angela Chen is like the good beginner guide. And I don't mean beginner in a derogatory way. I just mean like it's a very good basics of all of the asexual extended universe. If you are already there and you'd like to level up, the book Refusing Compulsory Sexuality by Sherronda Brown is like a much more cerebral academic study of sort of like why people are they struggle so much with this idea of like nuance and sexuality. So those are my nonfiction recommendations. I mentioned Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I also really like Alison Cochrun as an author. So she has a couple books out. My favorite is Here We Go Again, which is a sapphic romance that has a queer male elder. So like the premise is that it's two former best friends, now rivals, in their hometown. Ooh. They like were best friends in high school, and they had the same favorite queer English teacher, like a guy that they, you know, imprinted on at a young age because they were the only queer kids in the school. They're now rivals for reasons that have to get like, you know, explained. But essentially their professor that's been like a surrogate father, their teacher who's been a surrogate father to them is dying. He has a chronic illness. And so he asks them for one last road trip. So it's a road trip romance. It's really good. It's very tender. It's very funny. I like it a lot. She has two other books. One of them has a demi character. So The Charm Offensive is an MM book where it's like the main guy, Charlie, is the Bachelor, essentially, and he's on The Bachelor. He's like a tech genius billionaire, and so he's like really shy about being in The Billionaire, but he ends up falling in love with one of his male producer, and he realizes in the process that he was not destined for a show where he dates women, and in fact he's demisexual. She has another book, the sapphic book called Kiss Her Once for Me, so there's that one. And then the other one I'll plug is All the Painted Stars by Emma Denny. Came out at the end of last year. It's essentially a lesbian knight's tale. So like it's a medieval romance between a woman pretending to be a knight in like a jousting tournament, and the like, you know, the princess who's the lady who like is supposed to be married off to some man she doesn't want to marry, and they run off, and they like, there's a lot of beer being brewed in it. And it's really fucking great. It was really, and also just like, it's a gorgeous cover. This was when we did like book club about this, we talked about what an amazing feat it was for Emma Denny to be able to even get this traditionally published. So like, it says a lot about how far the publishing industry has come in terms of like, that would have been unheard of, like a historical, sapphic, medieval as a historical genre is also like super rare. It's a lot of most historical, I think like 95% of historical is Regency era. And so like you never get medieval. So that was also really fun. So yeah, those are my plugs.
Oh my gosh. Incredible. I have so much reading to do.
Yeah.
Well, anything that you would like to plug for yourself?
Yeah, I'll just plug my podcast again. So it's called Actually Useful. It is another industry plant podcast. So we have the same amazing producer. We interview people who are like doing something radically useful in tech. So we talk about the phenomenon of enshittification and like why a lot of consumer tech products are just becoming trash, especially even in the last couple years. And so we interview people people who are sort of like resisting that path and doing something different. And we also examine all the factors involved. And so you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and we're on most social media platforms. Our handle is at Actually Useful Pod. And so give us a follow, check us out.
Yeah, and especially listen to episode 2.
Especially episode 2. Yeah, crossover.
Actually, I lied. I have one more question. What is your favorite part about working with producer Josh?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I feel like making my podcast has been very like humbling in a lot of ways. It's been a very good experience, but I'm starting to realize like I'm having an uncomfortable amount of empathy for a lot of like CEOs I've worked with, because I'm just like, I really feel like very neurotic about full creative control. And like sometimes I'll be like, yeah, Josh, I'll give you those notes. And then I'm like 6 hours late with them and I have like 25 different edit marks on it. And Josh just takes it in stride, and he's really good about like getting like, you know, seeing my neuroses, honoring it, but being like, we gotta move on, we gotta keep it going, like can't be perfect every single time. So I think Josh does a really good job like doing what a producer should do, which is sort of like holding my hand through the process and being like, it's gonna be fine. There were so many things in the beginning where he had to keep reminding me that like the first couple episodes are just to find your stride. That's it. Like they don't have to be perfect. And I was like, what do you mean? Like they need to all, I have a vision. They all have to be perfect. And he was like, okay, well, why don't we like meet in the middle there? So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, he's the best. Well, thank you so much for coming by.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
She Comes By is part of the Industry Plant Podcast Network. It's hosted by me, Alex Mannix, and edited and executive produced by Josh Stretton Carlson. If you're interested in more bisexual content, check out the She Comes By weekly newsletter at shecomesbyweekly.substack.com. That's shecomesbyweekly.substack.com.